You are in for an interesting ride.
Hello and welcome to another Ammach Project Archives series. We're still in Ammach in America, and in this episode we hear Stan Romanek speaking about some of his extraordinary experiences, which have involved not only incredible amount of sightings, which were in the company of many other people, as well as incredible downloads of science equations, which Dr. Claude Swanson had a look at, and photographs and images. So this guy managed to amass quite a bit of information from the premise of not being someone who was interested or even necessarily believed in this UFO ET field. Although he had some unusual experiences as a child with some odd people showing up in it, you wouldn't think that he would be necessarily a contactee or an abductee. Anyway, Stan has fallen off the world at the moment because in 2013, his home was raided and his computer and equipment were taken on the premise that there was child pornography on it. It's also interesting to know that he had a phone call either the night or a day or two preceding this event, when he was also due to be signing a very lucrative contract with, I think it was Lionsgate, to make a film of the story of his life, and then had that call saying, and that is never going to happen. So we know that these things go on. I've always been in the camp of, I stand with Stan. His wife, Lisa Romanek, although they divorced due to the pressures of the case, she still helps him and has stood by him on the legal side. He does continue to fight his case and the injustices that seem to have been many around it. But this interview is not about that, because this was before that time and that incident, before we listen to what he has to say. But if anybody would like to be in touch with Stan as a friend, you can email the etnewsroom@gmail.com and just put Stan Romanek contact in the subject line, and I will pass that on. Sometimes, isn't it interesting, we find ourselves in conditions and situations which we could never have imagined, and that is the case with Stan, who's been living a health and liberty living hell. I know a little bit of how that can go simply because Bill Brooks, whose book 44 said it's not the ETs, it's the humans. And he had a lifetime of some malevolent interference down to whole communities raising up against him, which it just sounds ridiculous, sounds ludicrous. One last note. Stan is very or severely dyslexic. And again, that is not something that's uncommon in the contactee or experiencer field. Here now is Stan Romanek. Enjoy. Hello, and we're here in sunny Arizona at the 22nd International UFO Conference, and we're here with my guest, Stan Romanek. Absolutely delighted to meet Stan. This is the first time I've read his book, but I want to hear a lot more. So Stan, over to you. Welcome to the Ammach Project.
Well, thank you for having me.
I understand that your experiences began back in 2000, would that be right?
Technically, they really began when I was a child, but yeah.
I really don't remember those from your writing, so let's go over those for the
Well, I grew up in the
viewers.
military. My father was had top secret clearance in the Air Force, and he was in charge or did something with missiles, the late 60s, early 70s. And in 1968, my father was involved in an incident where a UFO came down and armed, not disarmed, but armed one of the missiles at Minot missile base.
I haven't heard of that one before.
A lot of people haven't, but it's out there.
So just remind me the time again, 68, did you say?
1968, yes, 1968.
Actually armed it?
Armed it, yes. I was 5 years old at the time. Now, they tracked this UFO from Minot to Grand Forks, then from Grand Forks to our small town in Northwood, North Dakota, where we were living at the time. We didn't live on base. I remember when I was little, a strange woman approached me, very stunned. Even as a child, I thought she was very pretty, except her eyes were bizarre. She had very huge, almond-shaped, so large, they didn't fit. Her eyes were so large they didn't fit, and they were so blue they were almost violet eyes.
And where was she? Where were you when you met her?
I was outside playing. I had this little pedal car that I was with, this little metal pedal car. And she walked up the street, up the sidewalk, and she ruffled my hair and she said, you know, you're very special. You have something very important to do when you grow up. And I remember she opened the palm of her hand and she had this marble, this blue glowing marble that started to float about a quarter inch off the palm of her hand. And just as she did that, I heard my mother yelling out the kitchen window at me saying, Stan, what are you doing? And I turned around and my mother was coming out the door because a strange woman had approached me. And the woman, when I turned around, the woman was already, halfway up the sidewalk, walking away. And at the time, I didn't realize there was any connection until 2000, jump ahead to 2000. I had my first UFO sighting. And I met this woman online. She's now my wife, but we became very good friends, and I wanted her to come visit me in Colorado. She lived in Nebraska, and I lived in Colorado. And I thought, I'm going to go up to the mountains of Colorado, videotape the area, send her some chocolates. And on my way to videotape, the mountains, there were cars pulled over the side of the road, approximately 30 to maybe 50 cars pulled off to the side of the road. And they were looking south above some power lines. As I'm driving, I'm looking to see what they're looking at. I thought at first it was a hot air balloon. And it was actually a UFO. And I had my video camera, got it out, because I didn't believe in this stuff. And I'm pretty sure...
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I actually captured something so I could show people to say, hey, look, I had this government experiment captured on film, because I really didn't believe in UFOs.
So can I, just before we go further into that story, can I just take you back to your childhood?
Sure.
So had you, from that time, since you were 5 years old, back in '68, was there anything that came out from that incident? Any further experiences?
I realized she had followed me. She showed up again throughout my life. She showed up again when I was, first when I was 5, then when I was 8, then when I was 10.
And was it always in the same sort of situation where you were on your own without your parents?
Always. No, actually, she showed up. I remember my father was transferred from the missile base in North Dakota to Cheyenne, Wyoming. I remember we were Christmas shopping or something, or looking for Christmas wrapping or boxes, or I'm not sure. And there was a woman that seemed to be following us a lot down there. And
do you remember her as the same woman that you've seen?
I remembering her from somewhere. She wore glasses, which I thought was odd because it was snowing outside, but she wore sunglasses. We were about to get into the car, and I was having a temper tantrum because I wanted to go home. I didn't want to go. I thought I was really bored and tired and wanted to go home. And I remember my parents had an old Studebaker, and the seats pushed forward so you could get into the back of the car. And my mother was sitting down and leaning forward so we could get in the back of the car. My sister was already getting back in the car, and my mom was yelling at me because I was just being a brat. And this woman came up and she says, what a wonderful, wonderful little boy you have. And my mom looked at this woman going, really? I remember she took off her sunglasses and my mother's reaction was like, oh my God. Yeah, I remember that specifically, and I remember thinking, those are really strange eyes, but as a child you don't put two and two together.
I mean, did your dad see that as well?
Oh, yeah. And then I remember thinking, I know this woman from somewhere, but I couldn't remember from where. My mother just jokingly, after she got over the shock of seeing this really bizarre looking woman, said, yeah, well, we're thinking of giving him away. The woman goes, well, if you're giving him away, I'll take him. serious. I thought she sounded serious, and I'm going, oh my God, my parents are really going to give me away. So I calm down really quickly, and my mom just goes, well, I think guess we got to keep him. Then I remember seeing her again when I was 10.
And again, what were those circumstances?
I was on the swim team, and our house was adjacent to a park. And this park had a public swimming pool and a playground. I went up there early to practice. I was the only one up there, waiting for the to come up to open the pool so I could practice. And I was literally laying on my belly, dragging my hands and feet in the sand, swing set. Yeah. And I hear somebody walking up the bike path or the path. And this woman sat 2 swings down from me. I'll never forget this because she was asking me these really bizarre questions. She started out, are you having a good day? Yes. And
did you recognize her at this point?
I didn't look up. I wasn't looking up. It was later that I looked up, and she says, are they feeding you okay? Are they taking good care of you? And I'm thinking, who's she talking? And she was, talking about my parents. Yeah. Are you eating well? And, do you like swimming? And then she said something really bizarre. I'm seriously dyslexic, and I never really had a very good time in school. I didn't like school. I was bullied a lot because people thought I was, not very bright, which turned out to be the exact opposite, thank goodness. She goes, I understand you're having problems in school, but don't worry, things will get better. And I'm thinking, who is this bizarre woman? And I look up, and she's wearing sunglasses, and she takes her sunglasses off. It's like, I know this woman from somewhere.
And are you now remembering that you've seen
her
a
a
few
I'm starting
times?
to remember that I've seen her from someplace. She looked at me, and she said, you have something very important to do. You're one of us. We're one of you. And when she said that, her mouth wasn't moving. And it scared me so bad. I ran all the way home and told my parents I didn't want to go swimming. And I tried to explain what happened, and they grounded me for lying. They said, if you don't want to be on the swim team, just tell us. Don't make up this cockamamie story. And I wasn't making up the story. And so that was a start. I actually saw her again. And without giving the plot away that's in my book, she ends up being related somehow. So it's really quite amazing. I have a sister, and I have 2 brothers.
And have they had any experiences?
They have. My brother had experiences, oddly, until he had a vasectomy, and then it stopped. But my sister still has some experiences, but not really. It quit a few years ago. But mine continue. And apparently it's a genetic thing.
What about your parents?
My parents, I have no idea. My father won't talk about it. I recently learned, and it wasn't that long ago, about a year ago, that I found out my mother actually had top secret clearance also.
Oh, really? On what basis?
She worked for a place called Rocky Flats, which made nuclear triggers and bioweapons and stuff like that. But I was told she worked for the Corps of Engineers. I later found out that was just a cover. And then a few years prior to that, I found out I was part of a project called Project Preserve Destiny. I believe I was. Can I prove it? Not really, but...
Just tell us about that.
A book by a gentleman by the name of Dan Burish, and it's a book called Above Black. And my wife noticed these amazing similarities, and eventually, I got in contact with this gentleman and find out that everybody was at the same bases, the same times, the same year. A rather interesting book.
Have you spoken much about it to your brothers and sisters?
I have. I talked to them quite a bit, especially concerning my sister. In fact, my first abduction experience happened with my sister. We had an apartment together. Oddly enough, having an abduction experience and the media gets a hold of it, they always try to tell you it's sleep paralysis. Oh. My abduction experience happened when I was fully awake. Somebody knocked at the door fairly early in the morning. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and they must have been knocking for a long time because it woke me up. And when I went to go answer the door, there were these 3 beings standing there, and I remembered everything. Yeah.
Let's just go back now to the first time. When you were in Nebraska, you were taking the pictures and you saw the UFO, and we'll just come forward again.
You're talking about the first UFO experience.
Yeah, you were.
I was trying to get my girlfriend to come visit me from Nebraska to Colorado. I was in Colorado when this happened. And I was driving along, I actually went the back roads up to the mountains. I found a perfect spot. It was December 27th, 2000. beautiful winter day, really warm out, very sunny. I was real excited. And I noticed these cars had pulled over, and I thought, well, that's an odd place for cars to be just in the middle of the road. And I thought, maybe there was a crash, maybe there's a lot of animals up there, maybe it was a bighorn sheep or an owl deer or something. But they were looking up. I'm driving along, and I'm trying to see what they were looking at, and as I got closer, I'm looking at this odd shape, and it's not your typical shaped UFO. It's not this dish-shaped UFO. Looked like it had a sphere on top with 6 smaller rotating spheres underneath. It was silver. It was, like a kind of a dull silvery color. Approximately, I'd say 30 foot in diameter, 30, 40 foot in diameter. It wasn't small. So I'm watching this thing thinking, oh my God, that hot air balloon is going to crash into the power lines, because it was about 50 feet above the power lines. It looks like it.
So really near.
Yeah, it looks closer. So I'm going, oh my God, what am I going to do? But as I got closer, I'm looking in between those spheres underneath this UFO. It was the blackest black I'd ever seen in my life. There is nothing on this planet that even compares to the void of light that was in between these spheres. And I'm thinking, what is that? I started to kind of get a little scared. I was a little frightened. And I realized then that what I was looking at was actually a UFO.
And before this time, as you said before, you didn't really believe in anything
I didn't
like
believe
that.
in that. In fact, even then, even up until, maybe a few months after my abduction experience, I still had a hard time. I blew it off as being some kind of military experiment. While we sat there, I pulled over. It got really creepy because I drove past it, and the thing was like this, hovering above the power lines, but as I drove past it, it tilted forward and started pacing my van. I'm thinking, this is really bizarre, and then I realized I had my video camera with me, and so I got my I pulled over, rolled down the window, and right when I did that, it seemed to notice that I rolled down the window, reorientated itself, and literally shot to about 1,000 foot in a matter of a millisecond. And I grew up in the, on Air Force bases. I know what sonic, those sonic booms are. There was a small sonic boom that made everybody, made my shirt vibrate.
So you got some footage for your girlfriend?
Oh, and I told her what happened, and I apologized. I told her what I was going to do, but I was kind of frightened, and I really didn't know if I should tell her. I didn't want her to think I was crazy. Luckily, she believed in this stuff, because that came in handy later on after I started having more and more and more experiences.
And then what was the next major event?
I had some business in Pennsylvania. My best friend, I decided to drive out there. I didn't want to fly. I didn't have the money really. This was 2001. I drove to Pennsylvania with my friend, and on the way there, we went up Interstate 80, and then we picked up my girlfriend, and we all drove to Pennsylvania. Well, we had thought we saw something on the way into Pennsylvania, right at the border, Pennsylvania and Ohio, I think it was. And I kind of blew it off. I didn't see it. My girlfriend saw it. My friend saw it. It's like, whatever. On the way back, though, Lisa saw it again. And this time we got up, Narco. She goes, oh my God, it's a giant disc. So this thing was actually in front of us and preceded us through 2.5 states. It was following us, basically. Every time, and we had, I brought my video camera. We had video cameras and cameras with us now because of the trip. Every time we pulled over to get a shot of it, it went into a cloud. It dove it. We watched it. We pulled over, watched it go into a cloud. As soon as I got on the road again, it came out, and we were,
And was this a first for Lisa? Had she seen?
It was a first. And definitely, not a first for me, but it was, and I got scared. I really did. I got scared because I knew there was something up. We were really scaring the heck out of Lisa because both me and my friend Mark, who is actually here with us, were hanging out the window, 80 miles an hour going down Interstate 80 with our video cameras. It started out with the increase in sighting.
How was that affecting you personally, your sleep, your behaviors?
Oh, yeah. Well, at that time, not really. But whatever happened to me along the way seemed to affect me electromagnetically, which is typical of abductees. They have, I don't know if it's, the things, the implants that's supposedly found with, but I started affecting anything electrical. Computers, I couldn't work on computers. I'd walk under street lights. In fact, one of the producers that wanted to do a documentary on me videotaped me walking under street lights, and every street light I'd walk under would go out. I couldn't hold on to hotel card keys, I wipe them. Watches, even to this day, I have to have a wind-up watch because I burn out watches. In the earlier days, I started being followed. I thought I was just being paranoid, but I started being followed by unmarked cars. I found out that my phones were tapped. You bet I'd approach them and they'd drive off, you bet. I mean, they always had dark windows, so I couldn't really get a good look. Sometimes there were black SUVs, either black SUVs or white sedans of some type, like a Ford Taurus or something like that. And they never had license plates on them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mm. And so, I mean, did you complain to the police about it?
I did, and they just kind of blew it off like as a nutter.
Yeah.
So, you know, that he's just crazy.
How would that observation go? Would they be sitting outside your house, or would they be tailing you?
I would be driving along and I'd notice a car just following me everywhere I went.
Yeah.
It got to the point where I'd drive around in the parking lot, follow me. You know, I'd go out this way, go out that way, and they'd follow me. We made a game of it.
And was that from right early on when you were having the sightings?
Not really. That happened a little bit later, not from the very beginning. It really happened after my abduction experience. September of 2001, I had, and this is when, see what makes my case so different, what people don't understand is most of the stuff that happens only happens with a lot of people around. And I'm talking in some situations, you know, hundreds if not thousands of people around. I was managing a retail store and I just let my last customers out. And it was about 7 o'clock in the evening. It was rush hour and the store was situated right at a corner of a very busy intersection.
And where are we at this point?
This was in Denver, Colorado. They came running back and they were knocking on the door. They said, "There's something above your work. There's something above your work." And I thought somebody had climbed down the building and was messing around on the roof. So I went outside to look, and there was this, again, 30, 40 foot diameter, perfectly round sphere, blinking red sphere, about 200 feet hovering above my work. And so I'm thinking, well, that is a really bizarre balloon. The only trouble is, we had, you know, 30, 40 mile an hour wind gusts that evening coming, you know, from the mountains, and that thing was just solid stationary. So all these people were watching this thing, and I'm sitting there watching it, and eventually it kind of drifted off and went away, and I locked up the door and I got in my car because I was kind of scared after all the stuff that I experienced. On my way home, I see this blinking object again, and it looked like at first it was coming toward me, but I realized it was actually hovering above my apartment complex. My best friend and my sister were waiting for me. We were going to go out to dinner that evening, and so I ran up the stairs and I grabbed my camera and I got them to come out, and we videotaped this object for a while before it just vanished. Well, we actually never made it to dinner that evening because of the incident. My friend eventually went home about 11 o'clock and I went to bed with an extremely bad headache. 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock at the door. Thinking, well, maybe my friend ran out of gas and had to walk all the way back, or maybe it was a neighbor who was drunk, forgot their keys. I wasn't sure, but by the time I got there, my sister had already opened the door. And there were 3, I thought they were young teenagers because they were small, very slender. And, you know, I'm yelling at my sister, what do they want? My sister is standing there. No movement, no nothing, just standing there with the door open. In the doorway, and I got close to them and I'm thinking, oh my God, these kids are wearing masks or something. And the first thing I thought of is, they're gonna rob us. Saying, don't let them in, they're gonna rob us, don't let them in. I'm rushing to the door, and as I get close, it's like, I step back because I saw that they weren't wearing masks. I could see the veins in their heads. I could see there was a female and 2 males, which is not typical of what you hear about ETs.
Can you describe what they looked like?
They were they weren't real small. They were about 4 foot something, 5 foot, not quite, maybe 4'3", I'm guessing. Very slender. Couldn't understand how they could hold up their heads because their necks were so skinny. And there was a female, she had female parts, and 2 males. And I remember they were wearing this kind of baby blue, almost looked like, you know, if you go to the Middle East, you see these outfits like they were in the Middle East, you know, long robe. They had very large almond-shaped, slanted, wraparound, so blue they were almost violet eyes. The irises were just like I remember the woman, but they had very sparse hair, huge heads. And I remember the woman stepped forward, and she had 3 fingers and a thumb, and her thumb was so long it was almost to the tip of her finger, and the palm of their hands were very long. And she grabbed my wrist, and I really don't know how to explain this, other than the fact a thought popped into my head. It's okay, it's going to be okay. And I'm literally screaming internally, but I couldn't do anything. Nothing would come out. And we lived in a 2nd-story apartment, and I remember she was leading me out to the balcony of this 2nd-story apartment. And I must have gotten frightened enough that I was able to do something. And there was a male on either side of me, and she was leading me by my wrist, telling me it's okay, calm down, it's okay.
So where are they leading you away from the house at this point?
No, we were still in the apartment, but they were leading me to the sliding glass doors of the balcony. And I must have snapped out of this trance or whatever it was I was in, and I grabbed one of the males. I was going to chuck him. I was going to throw him off the balcony. And I felt a tap, just a light tap on the back of my head, and I woke up somewhere else.
And what about your sister on that occasion?
She wasn't taken, but she remembers there were 3 people. It's weird because her memory was 3 people in suits came to the door. There were 2 males and a woman, and they all wore pinstripe suits. I remembered everything, and again, it wasn't sleep paralysis because I remembered everything. And that's the thing about the media, they try to blow it off as a sleep paralysis, but it doesn't account for my experiences or Travis or Betty and Barney Hill's. And if you do any kind of research, you realize that at least 70% of the abduction experiences people have are while they are outside doing something. So when I came back, I was so freaked out, my brain couldn't handle it. Said, it has to be a dream. So I got up, and my sister was already up, and I was wearing shorts, and I wasn't wearing a shirt. And I went to go make some eggs or pancakes or something, I don't remember. And my sister goes, what the hell happened to your back? I went around and I felt these holes in my back. I didn't feel any pain, but I felt with my fingers I had holes in my back. I looked down and all the hair was rubbed off my wrists, and I had these sores on my wrists, and then it all came flooding back, and I just kind of had to sit on the ground. And that was nothing compared to the next few days. I had to go to work. I had to do something. I had to pretend none of this happened. I had to be normal. So, I tried to go about my daily, and go to work. The only trouble is, who or whatever these things were didn't care if other people saw them, didn't care. They just didn't care.
Which is more unusual, isn't it?
It is. And again, that's what makes my story so bizarre, is most everything that happens with people around. Well, this particular incident, I was coming home from work, stopped to get gas, and I was driving during rush hour down a very, busy road. This was just right after abduction experience. And all of a sudden, there was a guy tailgating me, and I was about to tell him he was number 1. So all of a sudden, a beam of light hit the road right next to my car, my van.
On the driver's side?
On the driver's side. Expanded out. No, actually it narrowed and looked like it came and went over my van. Because it's a big city, we have police helicopters there, and they have spotlights, and I'm thinking it's a police helicopter. So I roll down my window, and like any polite citizen, I'm waving at this thing. And I noticed the guy that was tailgating me had gotten out of his car and was stopped in the middle of the road going, and I was driving through an intersection. As I was driving through the intersection, people were just absolutely, they were looking above my van, completely freaked out. And I remember there's this one guy that was trying to get his car in reverse, and he looked absolutely terrified. And so I looked up, in that same red blinking UFO that was over my work before I was abducted had beamed my van in the middle of a very busy intersection in the middle of rush hour for hundreds, if not thousands, of people to see. Well, luckily I still have my video camera with me, and we chased, this UFO went forward and slowly floated over this park called Old Stonehouse Park. There were tons of people there having parties and stuff. The beam of light shut off, videotaped this object, and there were lots of people there with other video cameras. And one guy, one of the written reports said that this beam of light penetrated my van and hit the ground below like a knife through butter. I don't remember that. I remember some weird static stuff.
You probably wouldn't have seen it anyway, would you?
Yeah.
Did you by this time get people calling you saying, neighbors, friends, hey Stan, what's going on? I
kept calling everybody, got to be crazy, I've got to be crazy, I've got to be crazy, help me, I'm going crazy.
I mean, did you tell your parents at this time?
My mom passed away in 91, but yeah, I tried to explain to my dad. My dad he didn't want to talk about it. Well, I know he still has secrets. You can tell he's concerned, but he just kind of divert the subject.
What was the next major incident that began to really impact your life and you knew that things were never going to be the same again?
The UFO stuff escalated and escalated and escalated. Eventually, I got married, and I moved to Nebraska to be with my new wife and her children, my stepchildren. And people following us escalated. We found more wiretaps on our phones. But there was an incident.
I was just going to say, just about the wiretaps, did you know who that was? What
They never
agency?
told me. We actually found wiretaps in our house twice now. We found wiretaps in our house. One recently, one just last summer. But really an event, things already, at that point, how could you help not believing in this stuff?
Yeah.
But when I lived in Nebraska, we lived in Kearney, Nebraska, which is a college town. University of Nebraska is right there. I have twin stepdaughters, very beautiful stepdaughters, and at the time they were young teenagers. Well, I had gotten up to go get a drink of water. I was watching TV late night, and I see a head pop down from one of the windows, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we've got a peeping Tom trying to get a look at my stepdaughter. Went running outside, could never catch this guy. This went on literally for about 3 months. Called the police, all the neighbors knew what was going on. We set up traps underneath the window, so if this guy was there, we could, hear, and I had a bat by the door, so I could.
And had your daughters seen anything?
Just little movements. Eventually, one of the researchers involved in my case said, hey, Stan, you have video camera, you have a Sony camera. Next time you see movement out of one of these windows, set up your camera toward that window, maybe you'll catch this guy. Well, that's what I did. I set up the camera on night shot, pointed it toward that window, and there's a bathroom at the end of the hallway, directly from where the window was. And I was sitting on the bathtub waiting because I really wanted to catch this guy. And I saw 2 flashes of lights, and I looked out, and I swear I saw the guy, and I would go rush into the window. It's like, yes, I finally caught him. But when I looked out the window, I thought I was watching a child run toward the backyard. Turned around, and I realized that this child was not normal. And it scared the heck out of me. And you can actually go on to my website and see this video. I get scared, freak out, and run around like a little girl. Oh my God. What the fuck is that? Here's the thing that's been following me. There are people that just tell me I'm full of baloney and I made it up and it's a mask, it's a costume. We've had that video analyzed by some of the top people in the world. It's all in camera. You can watch this creature blink and move its mouth, and you can see the infrared reflecting off its retina. And people always tell me, well, if the ETs are real, they come thousands of light years just to look in your window. That's ridiculous.
Well, it does sound crazy. They're so capable of doing so much.
But it happens in most abduction scenarios. Children sometimes will see owls watching them through their bedroom window at night.
Common.
And it's a common thing. In fact, I just talked to some people recently that had to talk to somebody about the experiences that they had when they were children, and they remember these beings watching them through their bedroom window. So you'd assume that they wouldn't do that, but again, they are alien. We don't understand the way they do.
What did you do to try and understand what was going on for you?
I was having a very hard time to the point where they thought I was going to have a breakdown. So the investigators, by this time I had some of the top researchers and scientists involved in my case, and they said, Stan, look, you got to go talk to somebody. And it's like, it's got to be a government thing. I kept trying to convince them that I was having experiments from some government experiment or something. And so eventually they hooked me up with a hypnotherapist, a local hypnotherapist in my area. And she was well versed in the abduction scenario, and they thought I would get help that way. Oddly enough, my case seemed to be fairly scary for this hypnotherapist, because during the regression, I started writing these weird symbols. I remember she asked me, do you remember anything, any weird signs, symbols, anything? I said, yes, I have these strange symbols in my head.
I mean, had you had them in your head before?
Not before these experiences, no, but after in fact, I had dreams about them all the time. So she gave me a pad of paper and she gave me a pencil or a marker, and she said, "Can you write them down?" I said, "Absolutely, I can." So I wrote these very complex equations down on this pad of paper within a matter of maybe 10-15 seconds. And you have to understand it, again, like I said earlier, I'm extremely dyslexic. I had a very hard time in school. If I'm lucky, I have maybe a 4th grade math level. Even being an international best-selling author, I can't spell very well. Thank goodness for editors and spell check. I fell apart in there because I thought I had to have been going out of my mind because normal people don't write this stuff down, and why was it in my head?
And did you know what it was?
I had no clue. She, however, had some idea that it was something more than just nonsense, and she recognized some of the symbols. So she sent these off to a Dr. Jack Kasher at the University of Nebraska. It wasn't until later that we found out they were actually very complex equations, one of which was an electron structure for an element that we didn't have at the time.
Have you been told what that element
Yes,
would...
it's element 115, which I later find
Bob
out
Lazar.
connection with Bob Lazar. And so 2 years later, somebody sent me a newspaper clipping. 2 years later, a Russian and a German scientist actually finally made this element 2 years after I had this equation.
2002?
2003.
So are you going through several hypnosis sessions at this time?
The last hypnosis session I had with this woman scared her enough that she took me out of the regression. My wife was, well, she was my girlfriend, but now she was there at the time. You know, I had some more questions and I wanted to find answers. Trouble is, in anybody that's gone through hypnotic regression, it's not what you think. It's not like they can control your mind. Most everything that happens, it's like you're in a deep daydream.
No.
Well, I thought I fell asleep. And when I came out, I apologized for falling asleep, except the hypnotherapist and my wife were sitting there going, and I knew something had happened, and they explained to me that my voice patterns had changed, my mannerisms had changed. It was like I wasn't me anymore. And it scared the hypnotherapist so bad that she stopped the regression.
So, and what was it that was being said?
Not much
Voice.
in this particular regression, not much at all. Eventually, I met a person named Dr. Leo Sprinkle.
Oh yeah, lovely.
Who is a wonderful man. He's a very dear friend now. He agreed to kind of explore this. And so we had a appointment set up with him later on, and eventually the same thing happened, and this time he ran with it. It's very hard for me to talk about because I really don't believe in that sort of stuff. I really don't believe in it.
So what is it that you don't believe?
When I went through the hypnotic regression process with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, I changed again. I thought I fell asleep. My voice changed, my mannerism changed, and whatever this thing was that was now coming out of me had concepts of things that there was no way I could have understood. Used words. And luckily, all my hypnotic regression sessions are videotaped. I was done. Some of the words this thing used, I had to look up because I didn't understand them. I've had about altogether probably about 18 to 20 sessions with whatever this thing is coming out of me. And again, I don't like to talk about it because I don't know if I have an altered personality that's coming through. I can't see that happening because this thing, whatever it is coming through me, can read minds. It has literally stopped phones from ringing and teleported the telephone from one side of a room, the building, all the way to the other side of the building through solid wall. It's embarrassing to me because people, I'm getting over it, but you know, going through the abduction scenario phenomenon is hard enough because you don't have anywhere to turn. Because not only do you have to deal with being frightened about what's going on from above, you have to deal with the people ridiculing you.
Which is why we've set up Ammach in the UK, so people can have a platform like this in which to share their experiences.
Which is wonderful.
And so many people haven't had that and don't have the respect. And what we're trying to bring is really raising awareness and to show people that they, you know, people like yourself have great integrity and authenticity, and you know, why wouldn't we believe you if we believe people who give testimony in a court of law? What's the difference?
And I have so much evidence, it's unbelievable. I have trace evidence, physical evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence from very expensive surveillance equipment. That's why I do what I do. That's why I continue to write books about this stuff and talk, because somebody has to.
That's happening for humanity, and we have to get to grips with it. We can't keep hiding from this kind of stuff. So have you written up what those sessions were about?
I have, and I put it in a book called The Orion Regression. They told us where they're from. He even explained how the moon was formed. Scientific knowledge that is absolutely amazing. Dr. Claude Swanson, brilliant man, probably one of the top physicists in the country as far as I'm concerned. Actually had conversations with this being about physics and about when he could get this being to answer, and a lot of times he'd say it was not important, but when he could get him to answer questions, the answers were stunning, really very amazing.
Did this entity or being or intelligence come through with any kind of identity?
Absolutely.
And can you tell if there is a
name?
All
of it's in my book. And what's interesting is they don't look at themselves as one, like I'm Stan. They always say we, more like a collective. And from what we found out, they are involved with me all the time, guiding to help the human. These particular beings are trying to help. I realize now there are multiple things here with multiple agendas. Even within my own experiences, I've had horrific experiences, and some that were almost angelic in nature. So that being said, I realize there has to be multiple things here with multiple agendas. Some really want to help us, but they can't get directly involved.
What's your overall feeling? I know you said they want to help us, but how do you see your particular role?
And I continue to go through it, but I look at things completely different now. For me, it's a spiritual journey. Once you get over the fear and you understand who humans really are, because humans have no idea who they are. Tell you who humans are is amazing. The abilities they have that they don't know. They've been dumbed down over the years by the people who want to control the human race. Yeah. And they don't need to. Once they realize who they are, things completely change.
Yes. Well, I think we're coming, I don't know about you, but I think we're coming to a point now, an apex, where this is, cannot continue in the same way anymore.
Absolutely.
How are you now living your life, Stan, with Lisa and your family? How do your children feel about it? Or they're probably young adults now.
At first they try to ignore it because, especially young teens, early 20s, it's not cool to be weird. Everybody comes over to the house to experience stuff, so they don't have a choice. It really is about helping the human race. That's all I want to do. I want to help, find some way to help wake up the human race. This is the most important thing in the history of mankind, and it's not fair that it's been kept from us. Not fair.
No, I totally agree with you. Absolutely believe it. So, apart from writing your books, what else are you doing to do your bit?
I'm speaking at these conferences. I'm speaking internationally, hopefully soon. Hopefully I'll be in the UK, spreading the word. That's all I can do. That's all I know how to do.
And what about Lisa? How is she managing?
She's managing me. That's a lot of work. I feel sorry for her. She's actually got a book, a brilliant book, and I got to say she's a better writer than I am, called From My Side of the Bed, and it's from her perspective. She talks about the things I don't. She talks about the scary things, the sad things, the really absolutely outrageously funny things. She talks about the hybrid children and the two other women that are involved with this case and with me, and because we found out there are 9 hybrid children from these experiences.
From both of you?
One is from my wife. One is there are other women that are involved that by chance that I remembered being up there, and they actually have come to visit and showed up at conferences and in front of.
You mean the women or the children?
The children.
The children.
The children.
Actually, I think I remember you. Yes, you pointed to a photograph.
In fact, we just had a witness from one of the other events that I was at when some of these children showed up. Hundreds of people to see.
I mean, do they come over to you and give you a hug and say hello?
Well, no, it's not like that. They show up and they're kind of mysterious and they stay to themselves and they try to blend in. And I'll never forget this. We had some information that these children were going to show up at one of the conferences, Aztec UFO Conference, which I understand is no longer put on, but they let us know they were going to show up, and sure enough they did. In this conference, of all things, this is a mystery, conspiracy in and of itself, was held at a Mason's lodge. I'll never forget this head Mason came up to me. He was crying and shaking because these children showed up in front of him. He saw these children with the huge eyes and the 3 fingers and the, you know, they were not altogether human, and they were physical in front of everybody. I was not there, I was getting dressed, and this one little girl came up to this woman and said, "Can you help me? I need to find my daddy." And she didn't know what to do. She was scared because this girl was not all human. She said, "I would like to give him a message," and left a message for me.
Can you share the message?
We're here to help. We're here to help the Earth. Tell my daddy I love him and I'll see him again.
Do you know where this race is from, what they're known as? Would we know them?
I would, but yeah, it's in the book.
Okay.
Plugging my book, I don't feel comfortable to, you know, just let it out, because it's about the journey. Put it out there. There's a connection with the woman and my childhood also. When you read it in the book, it'll blow your mind. It will. This whole thing is absolutely mind-blowing, and it's about, I realized through my experience, it's not just about these gray little beings or green little beings, whatever you want to call them, flying around in these shiny craft. It's about something more amazing. You know, there is life throughout all aspects of existence, all the way up to what we call the angelic realms. They're up there they don't need physical forms. They're multi-level beings that can penetrate time as we know it. We aren't sophisticated enough to understand. Humans aren't altogether human. They are bits and pieces of something even more amazing.
I think that too. I absolutely agree.
And you know, the presentation I do, I prove it. I prove these amazing abilities we have, and it usually just blows people away.
Just give us the name of your books, please.
The first book is called Message. It's a chronological order of all the things that happen, the connections to the military. I've got another book out called Answers, which explains who humans are, you have to understand everything that are in these books really, really happened. And then I have another book out called The Orion Regressions, which we discussed.
With Dr. Sprinkle.
With Dr. Sprinkle.
Wonderful.
And my wife has a book out tying everything together called From My Side of the Bed.
Now, I don't know if you've got any other new things that you're about to be embarking on.
Yes, I have no control over this. They do. There's a feature film coming out about my story. We have had some opposition. There are people that, well, we all know who they are, that don't want this information out.
Finally, to wrap things up, how you've managed with that, because I know it seems to be a global phenomenon also, that anybody who has any real deep experiences always are harassed, always are followed. The Men in Black show up. You haven't mentioned any Men in Black, but that seems to be also a very common scenario. From the tapping and all the other surveillance, it seems that there is and it seems to be a military governmental connection on the not so great side of things, because they're certainly not sharing what they...
This message is for them also. I was told that I cannot exclude this from anybody, because it's just they're lost. They don't understand what they're doing. So my message, I want to reach them more than anybody else, because I grew up in the military. Not everybody in the military is horrible. Really amazing, enlightened people. I don't know if you met one of the people with us today is ex-naval intelligence.
No, I haven't.
The guy is incredibly enlightened. He realized that he needs to go a different direction in order to save this race.
Well, that's fantastic, Stan. And I just want to say once again, thank you. I hope that now we've had a link, we'll be in touch and remain connected. And when you come over to the UK, really look forward to seeing you. And STAN ROMANEK, thank you.
Thank you for having me.